We are talking Dawn of the Dead, Bloodline, directed by Hector Hernandez-Vissens. Now this one you can really kind of describe as a sequel to the Zack Snyder 2004 Dawn of the Dead remake. It basically has your fast moving zombies. So really think of it as a sequel to that movie, although I don't know if it officially is necessarily. However, let's talk about the trailer first of all, because I saw this trailer for this and I saw a lot of criticism from the online community saying that it didn't like certain aspects. Now, in the trailer, it kind of hinted that the zombie virus was kind of mutating and they were becoming smarter and evolving, essentially. And I want to say, if you haven't seen this movie, without going into spoilers, don't worry so much about that, because I think it's probably a little unfounded, and I'll explain why in just a second. And I'll try to avoid spoilers as much as possible with this review. But it actually follows the Day of the Dead movie more so than I thought it was going to, the original film. Now there has been another Day of the Dead remake. I think it was called Day of the Dead Contagion, which I barely remember, but that was quite a low budget affair, which was more or less just a kind of a spin-off of anything. I don't even think it was official. This one, like I've said, it does kind of somewhat follow the George Romero Day of the Dead to a certain degree. We have a group of survivors held up in this kind of underground military bunker, and this is set up. This is basically 5 years after the zombie outbreak. We do see a few scenes at the beginning of the movie that take place at the beginning of the outbreak, and it's very similar to that of the 2004 Day of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead. So this is why I think you can really kind of say this is more or less a sequel to that. Then you cut to 5 years later, and we have a group of people holed up in this kind of military base, and there is a scientist played by Sophie Skillen called Zoe, who is trying to ultimately find a way to prevent these viruses spreading, find a cure, a vaccine, etc. And during one of these just happy days, she finds that one of these young girl is sick and wants to go out of the safe zone, so to speak, to try and find a vaccine for her. And while she's there, she ends up picking up a unwanted virus, so to speak, in the form of this particular zombie, and ultimately ends up coming back to the base through reasons I won't spoil for you. And they decide that this particular zombie has some kind of extra levels of intelligence and may be the key to unlocking the hope for the future and the vaccine for the virus. Now, like I've said, a lot of the critiques of this movie has been another fact that they don't like the fact that the zombie virus is mutating and what have you, and these smarter zombies. So let's say, for example, you can get over the fact that these are fast zombies. All right, this is the zombies that we saw in the 2004 movie. They're fast zombies. That's what we've got, and that film was quite lauded. Let's be honest. So fast zombies not a problem, I don't think necessarily. If your fears are a fact about the intelligence of the zombies, let me say two things for you. First of all, the original Day of the Dead Romero movie actually did dabble in this as well. Then there was a character called Bud in that one who was a zombie, and he basically started to display rudimentary intelligence. Now, that's the first thing you've got to remember. The second thing is, the zombie movies have been done to death. And the only way to move forward with the genre really and make it interesting is to do things maybe that we haven't done before. So having this the idea where maybe things are changing, then I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. I actually wish that Walking Dead would maybe do something like that and have to focus back on the walkers rather than all these human elements again. That's what personally I wish. And I wish maybe they would have this thing where maybe they had a particular zombie that was smarter than the others. And that is the other thing I would say. This isn't all zombie, it is one zombie. And we actually get a few lines at the beginning of the movie because this particular guy, before he was a zombie, had some rare genetic blood disorder that arguably you could say prevents him from turning fully zombie. And when we see him in his zombie mode, he looks very much like Bud from the original Day of the Dead. His makeup is very reminiscent of that, and kind of very obviously in homage to the original kind of the Bud character. And he's basically explained he's not fully dead. There are parts of his brain, parts of his heart is still alive, for example, and it's kind of preventing him from fully turning ultimately, and he could be the cure. The rest of the zombies are completely kind of the same zombies that you saw in the 2004 Dawn of the Dead movie. So if you're thinking it's going to be this whole new wave of zombies, it isn't. It's just one zombie, and that is explained through genetics, basically, or a mutation. You know, fair enough. So if you can get over that, then I feel you may enjoy this movie a little bit better. But that's not to say it's without its problems. Even I will say, even though the fact I quite like that maybe they've kind of changed the genre, I feel they've gone too far with it. This guy has the intelligence of a regular human being. He's still driven by kind of the need to eat, but he is as intelligent as a regular human. He can't communicate in the same way, but he clearly has cognitive thoughts and is able to put plans together. The thing that really bugged me though, he's as agile as a normal human. And we're told that this is 5 years later that he got affected. I mean, he got affected right at the beginning of the virus. And despite the fact that they've said parts of his anatomy are alive, a lot of it is dead. And he's no way going to be that agile after 5 years. So I do say there is still some criticism with that actual, the whole conceit of him being intelligent. I feel that maybe they should have had him somewhat intelligent, but not as intelligent, and certainly not as agile. He does a bit of a John McClane action and is kind of going through the air vents at one point. It's a little silly. The other thing that really bugged me is our central character, our antagonist, Zoe. And she is this doctor. Now, we are meant to root for her as the hero, the protagonist, but it's her actions that lead to every death in this film. So I find it really hard to kind of root for this woman. She decides to go out in this kind of like this dangerous area because one girl is sick, and she puts the lives of all of these kind of soldiers at risk because of one girl. And you know, the movie wants us to kind of root for her. We have this lieutenant who's meant to be this kind of like the antagonist, the human antagonist, who's a bit of an asshole. But I've got to say, pretty much every call the lieutenant made was the right one. So not only does she kind of endanger these kind of soldiers when she goes out, she does something selfishly whilst they're out there that ultimately leads to the destruction of this base, and leads this kind of like this particular zombie back to the base purely for selfish means. So I found it really hard to root for her. Then there's something else that happens a little bit later on when we have someone that's infected by a zombie bite, and the lieutenant ultimately decides to take it one way, which I think was probably the right thing to do in the circumstance, and she doesn't like it. But we're meant to, as the audience, side with her and think the lieutenant is the asshole. But he really isn't. He really is the one that is kind of thinking it through, if I'm completely honest. So I feel the movie misjudges this character, basically, where she's meant to be our hero, but ultimately, I mean, there is something that comes from this whole situation, but nonetheless, her actions ultimately lead to a lot of death. The other thing as well, and this is all down to the writing, really. This is what my problems with this movie. The other issue is our military are so incompetent in this film. They are so incompetent. They are so lax in security. They make stupid decisions. I mean, there's one thing which beggars belief. I mean, they need some zombie test subjects, and how they go about it is ridiculous. It's just ultimately so stupid, and sometimes you're thinking, oh man, it's just ridiculous. And again, the lieutenant is unaware of it, so he would have probably been the one to kind of maybe oversee it, and if they still wanted to go through with it, things to happen correctly. But they ultimately are kind of our good guys are made out to be massive morons, people who you're meant to kind of root for and you really don't. So that's my problems with this film. But what does work, like I've said, I do like the way that you sometimes these movies, they can kind of change the genre and kind of take it off into new directions. And although this movie does have a lot of elements to the original Day of the Dead, I do feel it introduces new elements as well. So kind of like I said, I think they went a little bit too far with it, but overall, I think it could have worked in principle. The budget of this movie was around $8 million, so it's a reasonably high budget for a horror movie. And I do think it really does show in regards to some of the gore effects here and the kind of the ripping of the flesh. I mean, we see some great effect shots where, you know, someone gets a bite out of the neck and you'll just see like a huge like chunk missing from the neck and things like that. So that I thought all works pretty well. The zombie makeup is pretty good. Our main zombie, Max, who is the stand-in for the Bud from the original Day of the Dead, his kind of mouth has been slightly augmented by CGI to kind of really make it like open wider and stuff like that, and I think it works for the most point. You know, I actually thought the action, the kind of the zombie effects, and the kind of the when we get the kind of the fight scene stuff, all look pretty good, and that was all that bit was all enjoyable. I just think this movie's real problems are in its writing, but I do feel some of the kind of the critiques maybe that people have it about it as a genre movie, particularly with zombies, and how it kind of is not a zombie movie, I think are somewhat unfounded. If you can get over, like if you enjoyed the 2004 Dawn of the Dead, then I think you're gonna like this one, despite the fact that it does have a few problems. Overall, though, I actually have to say I kind of like this movie. I wish maybe it had got kind of another set of eyes over the script and maybe kind of made it so our Zoe was not such a kind of unlikable character ultimately, and try and make her not so stupid and make bad decisions and ultimately lead to the death of probably most everyone in the cast. So overall, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I could have enjoyed it still as a zombie movie. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.